Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take you behind the scenes at the Detroit Lions' newly renovated Meijer Performance Center in Allen Park. We'll also take you behind the scenes at Ford Field. We're going to show you the locker rooms, the weight room, and the practice field too, and share a few tidbits we picked up along the way. Now, folks, many of you listen to this show in an audio-only format, and I want to suggest maybe for this one, you check us out on YouTube and watch the video version because we're going to incorporate some extra photos and videos in this episode to help show you some of the things we're describing. We also hit on newly announced training camp dates and discuss some of Brad Holmes' recent insights shared on the Greenlight Podcast. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hi, this is Dan Miller, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is James Cook, the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle, who's also named Sports Writer of the Year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. James, good to have you here.
Always good to be here. Thanks for letting me tag along the other day.
Yeah, and it's a bonus episode, right? We were expecting a break until July, but here we are doing a little extra fun podcast show.
Yeah, putting extra work in.
All right, well, let's get started. The big thing is the behind-the-scenes look at Allen Park. All right, we took a tour of the renovated facility earlier this week. It's about 40 minutes long. You got to see all kinds of behind-the-scenes things that a lot of fans don't often get to do that. So I guess let's just kind of go chronologically through the tour. And it started by you go in on the indoor practice field, and it's called Sandoval Field. And you get to see, on television or in interviews, you see this often, like with players being interviewed there during training camp or the preseason. A couple years ago, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Peter King did a really good interview there as well. What were some things you picked up on the first part of it when we were on the indoor practice facility?
Yeah, it's a pretty huge facility. The one thing is interesting is the goalposts, or actually the lack of posts in the goalposts. They're suspended from the ceiling, so I'm going to guess as a safety thing so that players couldn't run into them during practice. So there's no actual post that attaches it to the ground. They're just hanging from the ceiling. So they can still kick field goals and do all that kind of stuff, but they don't have to worry about players running into the goalpost and potentially hurting themselves.
Yeah, that was a great observation you made on that because I didn't pick up on that at first. And I actually probably should have asked somebody about that, but I think your observation is probably right. It just keeps it out of the way. So it's just one less thing, whether it's a player running into it or them wanting to move equipment around. It's just something you don't have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to guess it's got to be a safety thing.
Yeah. And again, I didn't know there was a name for the field. It's called Sandoval Field. It's a name for a former director of security at Allen Park, Ricky Sandoval. And so, they've got the name of that above the scoreboard there. And so that was a nice little piece of history to learn on that as well.
Yeah.
The turf. They talk about being the same style turf as that they use at Ford Field. This way they're practicing on the exact same type of surface. Seems like pretty common sense, but we also know things weren't all that common all that long ago because the Lions used to practice outside the Silverdome and actually got kicked off their own turf at the Silverdome when trying to practice once. Corey Schlesinger and Mike McMahon told me that wild story. So we've come a long way, and it makes a lot of sense to have the same type of turf in the practice facility as they do right at Ford Field.
Yeah, because you've got the grass field outside. So they can practice on that to prepare for games that are played on grass. They can practice in the indoor part to prepare for their games at home to get more used to it, and other games that are going to be in other stadiums that have turf as well. So they got options for how they want to practice, whether they want to do it indoors, outdoors, grass, turf, all that kind of stuff. So obviously a lot of thought put into this whole building if you go in there and check it out.
Yeah, and it's a pretty great facility, and obviously with the new
Mhm.
renovations and updatings, it makes it probably right where it needs to be. And the turf, as we know, got replaced a year early at Ford Field, and so they surveyed the players, and I think they looked at other things to see what was the best type of turf available, and I think that's what they put in there. So. Any other thoughts on Sandoval Field on the indoor facility? Actually, I think you spotted something inside the facility. Was it inside the facility or outside the facility? It had four wheels on it.
I didn't. I saw it. I saw somebody else who was on the tour or on one of the tours during the day who spotted it and posted a photo of it, and that was the Patricia Mobile, the black four-wheeler with the Lions logo on it that Matt Patricia famously pulled up to interview in. And apparently it's just been sitting there and nobody wants anything to do with it. Uh,
That's
and
wild. I didn't even I did not pick up on that. I didn't see it. I didn't even know about that. And so that's kind of funny that would even still be there.
Yeah, that was something I didn't see, but somebody posted a photo on Twitter of it, and so it was pretty funny. I mean, the comments under it are a lot of things at Matt Patricia's expense.
Sure, makes sense. Well, once you left the indoor field, and it's cool, you can see to the right side, the field is actually attached to the rest of the facility itself. There's doors there that lead into
Mhm.
the hallways and to the offices, and there's an observation deck, I believe it is, up top with also some exercise equipment, and yeah. So
Yeah.
after you leave that area, you exit the building for a minute, and there you are on the practice field. But you're not in the
Mhm.
practice field area where you normally would be if you visited training camp. You're actually in the area that would be the area that connects to the indoor field. So you're right there. So the area where the players are walking in and out. And so
Mhm.
you kind of get a look outwards, except there's no stands there right now. There's no bleachers right now, which those will be getting set up here in a few weeks because training camp is quick approaching. The Lions just announced those dates, and we'll get to those. But
Yeah.
it's kind of neat seeing it from a different perspective, and not just seeing it from a different perspective, but learning that they've got like two or three different fields out there. It's not all just one type of grass. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's to prepare for just the different types of grass fields that are on the NFL. I would guess, or maybe it's for health reasons. Who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows about that? I didn't get to ask our tour guide Adam about that. He did mention that the turf inside is only 2 years old. I think it was put in 2023, and that it would be good for another. I think he said 3 or 4 years, which is
Yep.
interesting because most of the time, like high school turf that gets put in, it's becoming a popular thing now for high schools to put artificial turf in their football fields. That's supposed to last like 10 years.
Yeah, maybe there's like the longevity within a range. And, if you've got the
Hmm.
funds to replace it sooner, you do the sooner part. But if you don't, it has a longer life expectancy. I don't know. I'm I'm
That
I'm
could be true.
hypothesizing on that one.
That could be true. I mean, you're also talking about much larger human beings being on it than high school kids.
Yeah, yep, that is true as well. Well, you already mentioned the guy's last name, so I will reference the last name as well, and that's Patricia because you got probably the best view of Patricia Hill, right? I mean, from the stands, from the outside area at training camp, you're much further away from it. It's in the distance there, but they had a newly painted logo, and then right on the outside of the fields, and then just to your right in the back corner there is that infamous Patricia Hill. And I think I heard somebody say it's a little hard to move all that. And so it really has just kind of been left alone because, well, it's just there. And sometimes just leaving something there is easier than replacing it.
Yeah, I think it was one of the tour guides that mentioned that yeah, they just haven't really done anything with it. So it'll be interesting to see how soon they get rid of that, or if they just leave it there, or if maybe eventually they just start using it again.
Yeah, yeah, all three are very, very distinct possibilities. So we weren't outside very long, but we got a little view of that. And again, a lot more will be happening as they're getting ready to ramp up for training camp here. We headed back inside and we immediately went to the left-hand side, which took us into the weight room. And a good amount of detail has been put into that weight room. And I want to say that they updated that one very recently as well, just a year or two ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I know they did some work last summer as well to the weight room. Did you have any insights on that?
Yeah, it's been updated in the last few years, I think. But they've got all the weights with the rubber clad weights and everything like that that are a little bit more safe in case you drop it or run into it or whatever, where it's got kind of the rubber around it and with the Lions logos and stuff on those huge plates that they put on all the machines and everything. So it was an impressive amount of machinery
Oh, for
of
sure. I
lifting
actually
machinery in there.
one of the guys that was working there asked him, "Did you ever get to use this place?" And he said, "Well, depends when his shift ends. Sometimes he does get to." And I just continued the dialogue and said, "Yeah, I'm not strong enough to work out in this weight room." And so,
Mhm.
yeah, very impressive machinery in there and amount of weight available to lift as well.
Yeah. Did you notice the thing that had all the shoes in it?
Yes, the
Where
cubbies with all the
each
shoes.
player had a little cubby in the weight room where they could put their shoes. And my Lord, I think it was Dan Skipper's that just dwarfs everybody else, even Sewell's. Uh Man, like those shoes were, I don't know what size they were, but like 16 or something. I don't know. They were massive. I couldn't believe it. I took a photo and it didn't really convey how big a pair of shoes those were.
Well, leaving the weight room, we went right into the training room, and a lot of training room tables there, a lot of spots, I presume, for getting treatment, getting therapy, getting worked on. Any observations about the training room or anything like that?
They had a lot of different colors of athletic tape that you could choose from. The players get pampered even in the athletic tape.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a thought or theory behind some of those things, and I know certain types of tape can have more resistance. I think perhaps I'm not sure, or if the tape's just the tape. Not my
Yeah, or
specialty.
maybe some's waterproof, maybe some's, for putting under shoes,
Yeah.
different kinds of things like that. But yeah, there was like, I think there was about a half dozen different colors of athletic tape on the one table there. And then the one area that looked like basically like a pharmacy that was just all the supplements and nutritional things and everything. It just looked like you were walking into a CVS.
Well, one place I know you were hoping to walk into, but we didn't get to, was the cafeteria. You wanted to check that out, but you did make some food observations nonetheless.
I was able to poke my head in that hallway that goes into it a little bit, and in there you can see, they have some of the vending machines that have like cold beverages and everything, and they have a screen that they can pull down on those when they have people from the public in, like for these tours, so that nobody steals their drinks and whatnot that's in those little things. But they had this one nook that was just like a hotel breakfast buffet type area, but like just on steroids. Uh, much better quality, I would say, than what you would get at a Days Inn or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Well, after we walked past that area, we went into the locker room, the newly renovated one, and folks, it's just as nice looking in person as it looked on that quick release video by the Lions. Like I say, quick because there were a lot of shots, a lot of different directions, a lot of movement, and if you just slow it all down a little bit and you just pause and look around, yeah, I mean, you can tell it's brand new. It looks great. Um, the chairs are huge. If you sit in one, you're going to be like, wow, there's a lot of space here. You've got a variety of different size guys, but the chairs are all the same size. So whether you're Dan Skipper, Panay Sewell, or Jake Bates, you're all sitting in the same size chairs. And obviously, they can move things around. I know, like, Jerry Goff and Hendon Hooker have their lockers next to each other. What were some of your initial impressions on the locker room there, James?
Yeah, they're all grouped by position groups. So the offensive linemen sit together, the linebackers sit together, the defensive linemen sit together. The DBs, all those are kind of grouped, and then they had the special teams corner, which was Hogan Hatton and Bates and Jack Fox, who had his golf trophy sitting in his locker because he won the Lions golf tournament, I guess, that they have every year between all the players. And apparently Jack Fox was your champion of that this year. So uh, you know, he's already
Yeah.
starting the year off on a winning note.
Cool, yeah, and the chairs, like I said, they're luxurious, they're nice. They've got some spots I think above them for you can put some personal items. You got the players' names and numbers on there, marking the
Hmm.
spots. Plus, inside the middle of it, you got, and if you've watched the video from the Lions release, there's a ping pong table there, a pool table, a video game system. There's even a table and cards set up. Some people maybe have been playing that not too long
Hmm.
ago, and so just I've never been in that place before the renovation. James, had you ever been in there or seen that area before the renovation took place?
Not in the locker room, no. Basically, the only thing I'd ever been in before was the media room.
Okay.
So, they pretty much let you just go from the field to the media room, and that's about it. You don't really get to wander and see anything in there when you're working.
Yeah, I did not come across. I didn't look very hard online, but I just took a quick look to see if I could find any of the video beforehand anywhere, just to kind of get an idea for a comparison. But I'm sure there's some out there that'll surface at some point. But it's a very good looking locker room, and again, the Lions
Hmm.
administration and whatnot, the coaching staff, they said they want the players to want to spend more time out there, right? To not feel like they got to get out of there right away. So if you make it an inviting environment, they're going to stick around a little bit more, bond more with the teammates, and yeah. So after we left the locker room, we went down a hallway, and I believe that's where we saw the Pride of the Lions, and that was
Hmm.
pretty cool. They've got it written on the side there on the wall, and then they've got plaques for the people who have been inducted into Pride of the Lions. 2009 was the inaugural season, a large number in that class, and then of course you've got people who have followed since then, and I believe the most recent was Calvin Johnson last year, Lomas Brown the year before that. And so I thought the decals were really nice, or the decals, the I don't know what you call it, the painting, the drawing on the wall, and I thought that was pretty awesome looking. So,
Yeah, they were
what
kind
were
of like a
you?
frosted glass plaque, kind of
Oh yeah,
for
yep,
each guy. Yeah. And then they also had they had that spot on the wall too as you get a little bit closer to the meeting room where they have the display for who wins the game ball every week.
yeah. I thought that was
Which I
pretty
think,
neat that they apparently keep a running total of that, a running display of that throughout the
Mhm.
entire season.
Yeah, just another thing to motivate the players, get your name up on the wall.
So, well, then, as we went down the hallway, we headed to the team meeting room. And, that's made famous on Hard Knocks because you got to see a lot of videos that came out of there, a lot of coaches' meetings.
Hmm.
They've got the slope floor. It's sloped down slightly, kind of like a movie theater, but it felt like there was less of an incline to me than what you would find in the old school movie theaters, not the newer ones that have the stairs and all that. Um, and there's a short video, a season recap that they played in there to end the tour as well. What were some of your impressions of the team room there at the end?
Yeah, I thought it would have more of a slope to it too. It just seemed that way more so in Hard Knocks. But I'm going to guess that's maybe just camera angles. Again, they had, custom made seats with the Lions logos on them that were pretty comfortable. It was interesting that on a table in the back they had these stack of books that were labeled offensive workbook. And I was like, there's no way they left playbooks laying around, right? And I opened one up and they're just blank notebooks for the players to take notes on.
Okay, I was going to say if they just left a playbook around there, I mean that would be very unexpected.
Yeah.
So, well, hey, at least they didn't leave an iPad unattended, unlocked, where somebody could get somebody else's phone number, make a prank phone call. So, yeah, I think one of the things I thought was really cool was in the back though they have a quote from Henry Ford, and I love those quotes. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I love that quote. But underneath it, you remember when Campbell and Holmes and company came in and started getting things going. They put a reminder up there that 1957 was the last time they won the league championship, and it was 1993 their last division championship, and 1993 I think also was the last division or the last playoff win, or 93 I think as well. But they've got them covered up. They didn't paint over it. They put I think would be like I don't know, just some sort of
Athletic tape.
athletic tape right
They should use
over it.
athletic tape and markers.
Yep, and markers, and just marked it right up and put 2024, and they changed Central Division champs to North Division champs, and they got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Detroit Lions, 31-23, January 21st, 2024 victory. So I thought that was
Mhm.
pretty cool. I like that. Um,
Yeah, and they're hoping obviously to be able to change that third one
yeah, that would be nice to get that one.
here sometime soon.
And the word we haven't talked about, we haven't said the word once yet, but you saw it everywhere in the facility. You've heard about it, but you've heard it's everywhere, and it really is the word grit. I mean, I don't know if there's a room we went
Mhm.
into that didn't have the word grit written in it.
Yeah, they did. They had it in the hallway, definitely. They had it in the meeting room, in a couple places, I believe. And they also had the quote from Sheila Hamp about winning and losing. That is it's the I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something
It
like
went like this. It says it doesn't matter whether you win or lose
until you
until you
lose.
lose.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yep, they got that quote in there, and they actually had the definition of grit out there as well,
Hmm.
defined like a Webster dictionary type decal up on the wall there as well. So, yeah, I thought the room was pretty sweet. I loved all the inspiration they have around it, and you kind of just sense that theme throughout the whole facility wherever you were, whether it was in the locker room or the team room and whatnot. So. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the team room right there?
No, that it's pretty interesting. They had extra seats set up in the aisles, but I think that was just so they could accommodate the tours that they were doing and
Yeah.
stuff. Or I guess maybe during the OTAs you're going to have 90 guys there instead of 53 plus the 18 or 16 on the practice squad. Uh, so maybe they're making room for those guys, but they have the full 90 in the locker room,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
They've got
another
all their.
interesting thing. Full 90 locker room. So everybody in the OTAs gets their own locker room. They had, the new guy, Tristan Colon, he had his there. All the undrafted free agents, the guys who made it out of the rookie camp, all that, they all have their own locker, at least for now.
The team meeting room, I guess I would say it was smaller than I expected it to be, based what you saw on television. But
Hmm.
like, if you've ever been anywhere, I mean, I've been to the U.S. Capitol building and the Senate and the House of Representatives. Those rooms are smaller than when you see them on television during a presidential address.
Yeah.
I've been to back in the day. I went and saw David Letterman in New York, and again the crowd, the audience area is much smaller in person than it looks on TV. A lot of times they use wide angle lenses or stuff like that. So not as big. It didn't feel as big, but I mean, it didn't feel small. But it always seems a little
Right.
bit bigger on TV.
Yeah, for sure. I thought I kind of expected to go in there and have it be kind of like a college lecture hall feel. But it
Right.
really didn't.
Yeah. And I will say on our way out in the lobby, I unexpectedly got to see something I was hoping to see, but I didn't think I would, which was the Tom Kowalski Media Room. And James, that was a really big deal for me because I was a huge fan of Tom Kowalski's work. I
Hmm.
followed him, all the stuff he did on M Live, loved it whenever he did radio stuff with people. And, I worked for the NBC affiliate in Northern Michigan. Back in 08, 09. And so just working in the industry at the same time as him was awesome. And I got so lucky that back in, I think it was the summer of 09, outside of a Tigers game, I ran into him and actually got to meet him. And, he was just, I guess you would almost say he is the standard that people look to when they say, hey, how do you do this job? And you looked at the work he did, and it was incredible. And unfortunately, he passed away way too early. And they named the media room after him, the Tom Kowalski Media Room. And if
Yep.
anybody followed sports back then, I believe every single NFL stadium that year left one empty seat for him in the media room the year he passed away, which I believe was 2011. And so it just talks about the impact he has had in the industry and on many people's lives.
Yep. They call him Killer Kowalski because he wrote some killer stories. I got to sit next to him in the I just happened to sit next to him like in like little cubicles that they have, which are just little not very fancy desks to put your laptop on and do some work or whatever. I got to sit next to him, but I
That's awesome.
we were working, so I did not bother him and or say anything.
Yeah. Very cool. And then, the lobby on the way out, they've got a few statues set up there with different uniforms put on. And you notice there was one other addition that might not have been there before, but they've got now.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. They have an ATM machine like right outside the meeting room door.
Yeah.
And hey, players got to have some cash, right?
Hey, maybe there's like a favorite lunch place around the corner that doesn't take credit cards. Who knows? I have no idea. But there is an
Hmm.
ATM machine there, and it almost seems a little
Hmm.
strange, but hey, you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, did you notice the bags laying around? The food bags, the food
Yes,
delivery
yes.
bags?
At first I thought it was DoorDash, but it wasn't DoorDash.
Yeah, I think it was something the team had delivered or something. But I noticed one of them had said a Aleem on it, and there was one by the exit where we were going out that said Brad.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna guess that's Brad Holmes, maybe.
perhaps. Yeah. So, well, hey, on our way home, on our way back, though, we stopped and grabbed some food. Speaking of food, and I met a couple of Lions season ticket holders who had also taken the tour, Kelly and Mark from Kalamazoo. So it was fun. Chatted with them for a little bit. Kelly said she really liked seeing Rodrigo's locker. She's a big fan of him. Can't wait for him to get back later in the season. And Mark really liked the team room. And I guess for him, the big turning point was, you got to see the spot where Hutchinson danced and sang to Billie Jean. And I mean, pretty iconic moment from, the from the inside, not inside the den, from Hard Knocks. So that was pretty cool. Um,
Mhm.
Another thing that came out of Hard Knocks was, Jason Cabinda's viral shot where he's pretty intense, right? I may have tried to recreate that scene. I don't know that I did it any justice. So we'll see if it makes the cutting room floor and doesn't make it in, and you just hear me talk about it, or if I'm crazy enough to try to put it in. We'll see what happens. But what was your favorite part of the tour, James?
I liked the almost unprotected autographed Barry Sanders ball by the exit. That I was trying to come up with a plan how we could make it ours. Uh, but no, seriously, I liked some of the little details you talked about. How just the details and things. The lockers, the lockers. I guess the chairs that they sit in the locker room. In between each one of them, it says 313.
Yeah.
So it's part of that, Detroit identity. It's got the area code on every locker. So I just thought that was a really cool touch.
Nice. Yeah, I obviously I touched on the Kowalski Media Room having a special place for me with the journalism background and whatnot, and obviously being a huge fan of Tom Kowalski. But in general, there's just a lot to like from this tour. I liked being on the inside practice field, just seeing what that was like because it's not a spot you ever get to go to. And if you're there during training camp, you walk around it and everything's sessioned off. So, the players disappear into that area sometimes, but you're never in there. And, just seeing that setup was nice. Obviously, like I said, the locker room was just as exquisite as it looked from the
Hmm.
promotional video the Lions released. And it's pretty cool seeing
Yeah.
that. And I'm just going to say the updated numbers on the back wall, that was pretty cool. I think that might have been my favorite, which we talked about earlier with that athletic tape and just doing that. I thought that was pretty sweet. So, well, hey, any final thoughts on the Allen Park tour before we talk a little bit about Ford Field?
No, I think that's pretty good. Oh, the other thing they had in every locker was the established 1934.
Okay.
Was There was a little thing on every locker that says uh or cubicle or whatever you want to call them. They're not really
Yep.
there really lockers, in a standard sense or whatever. But yeah, they had that on every one of them to kind of set the history.
Makes sense. All right. Well, last summer I toured Ford Field, and it was a much quieter. It is very much quieter when there isn't a game going on, of course. And that said, though, there's a lot of people that work at Ford Field on a daily basis. Um, they've got personnel in both Allen Park and Ford Field. I think a lot of more of the business side of it is located at Ford Field, but they have
Hmm.
offices in both. They do work together and coordinate. You can actually do a tour at Ford Field anytime. I mean, you have to book it ahead of time. As far as I know, they still do that to the public, but you could sign up and book a tour there. I think there's a
Hmm.
small fee for that, but the tour there at Ford Field runs about an hour long. When I went last summer, I brought my daughters with me, and you get to check out the field from, all the vantage points, the 100, 200, 300 levels, which, I mean, if you go to a game, you can do the same thing. But one thing you get to do is also check it out from the club level. Because there's two club sides, right? There's the club side that's on the visitor side that anybody can kind of just walk to. It's not like sectioned off. But on the home side, you have to actually take an escalator up, and you have to see your tickets to let you into that area. And so that was something that was nice to get to look at, because until I went to a preseason game last year, I had not been on the club side, on the home side. And I think that's the side that's probably more connected and, probably the preferred club side to sit in, because that's where all the suites are as well. Have you been in that area, or any thoughts on the different levels?
I've kind of been through it, I guess, on the way to the media room. Do
Yep.
they have, can you go to the media room as the tour or no?
Oh, yeah, yep, yep.
Like the press row?
I went in the media room back in '08, and then I was able to go back in the media room during the tour as well. We'll get to
Yeah,
that
the
in a
press
minute.
the press box up high.
Yeah, the press box. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. It is amazing how far away the field is from
Oh
that
yeah,
press box.
up in the
It
press box. That's a whole different level than
the
than
press
the
box
club
are
level.
the worst seats in the house.
Yeah, so after the club level there, which again, there's lots of restaurants, there's all the suites. The suites are pretty impressive that they've got there. But then you take an elevator ride up, and you go up high, because if you've
Mhm.
never been up there, it's up there. You can't get up much further up. It almost takes you back to the upper level of the Silverdome days. Almost, it's pretty high up there. But yeah, again, I visited there as a member of the media. I saw it during game day, and everything was set up and good to go. Obviously, this was in the summertime, so it wasn't really set up at all. But it gives you the bird's eye view. It's that high up, right? Um,
Yeah.
they've got tons of seats and monitors to help people who are working. They're legit working during the game. They're not rooting. I mean, if they're rooting, they're definitely not rooting out loud, because it's a working environment. But you go past the door that says like NFL replay, no entering, stuff like that. So they've got those
Mhm.
areas identified. But like I said, it wasn't prepared the way it normally would. And again, that replay booth that says no one can enter, something like that. So, yeah, I mean, you're way up there. And if I remember correctly, when I was there, the Lions did a decent spread on that. They feed members of the media and stuff like that. And but the bigger thing is they've got, it's changed a little bit, I'm sure, but they had access to instant stats right away, and they were just making sure you had information available. And I'm not quite sure how they're doing it
Mhm.
recently, but yeah, great communication there.
Yeah, and yeah, being up in the media box, like I said, it's kind of the worst seat in the house. Like we've been in the seats. I've been in the seats that are like literally the last row in
Okay.
the upper bowl, and you can see the game much better from there than you can from the press box, because you're so far away, you're so high above the field. It's just crazy how far. So you end up kind of just watching the game on TV because
Yeah.
it's a much better experience, and you can see what's going on a lot more than you can from the actual press row. And it's like in the press row too, it's like there's like three levels of it
Yep.
and stuff, so you can be even farther away if you're in the third upper level. It's
Yeah.
an
Like I said,
experience.
like I said, that reminds me a little bit of the Silverdome. I mean, my first game at the Silverdome was the exact top row of the Silverdome corner of the end zone. And so, I don't know that this totally replicates that, but you're right. It's not it's about as far away as you can get. Well, after being way up there in the press box, you get to go down below. You get to go underneath. You get to go to the locker rooms. You get to see the Lions locker room and the visiting locker room. Of course, without any players in the room, it's very different. I mean, when I was there and reported, it went to the locker room after the game. It's filled with 53 players, coaches, other media members. It's a very busy place. This wasn't busy, right? There was nobody else in there. They did have a couple lockers set up. I believe it was Hutchinson and St. Brown's. There was some sort of an event going on later that night. they were set up next to each other. I don't think they're necessarily set up like that. Those were just for display purposes for that. But it is a bigger. It feels much bigger when there's no people there. But that's to be expected. And again, there's no equipment in the lockers. There's no nameplates on there, stuff like that. There are some names written around there, like I believe Lomas Brown, Chris Spielman's names are in the locker room written up top. But yeah, that was my impression for that. It was nicer than the visitors' locker room, which is not too far around the corner. Both of those, though, they don't compare to what just got renovated at Allen Park. That's a whole different facility over there, and they have a lot more space. So, any comments, any thoughts on the locker rooms?
I've never been to the locker rooms.
Oh, all right. So yeah, and they have a choice. You had the option after the game was you could go for the locker room or you could go to the podium room where the coach and a couple of players would come out. And so I headed for the locker room when I was there.
I've been to the podium room a bunch, but not the locker rooms.
Well, in addition to checking out the locker rooms, you get to actually walk the players' walk. And what am I talking about? That's you go through the tunnel. You get to see the photos and the murals from the local artists. That includes the Detroit versus everybody sign. And it's really a big tunnel, which makes sense because you got to get equipment in and out. There's other vehicles, bringing stuff around. And there's a couple other things that are interesting. One is there's a thing called the Tunnel Club, I believe. And there's like a bar down there and, tables and stuff. And then there's a spot for them to go to the side and they can actually kind of be partly in the tunnel area, like there's a glass wall and stuff like halfway up, but the restaurant, they can look out and they can see the players walking out down the tunnel. So
yeah, I think they can reach out and high five them.
If players want to, they can do that. Yep. And then in addition to that, fans, one of the things that season ticket holders and others sometimes get to do is line parts of the tunnel before the game, so when the players come out, they're there. Now, as wide as that tunnel is, there's actually a secondary tunnel adjacent to it. Are you aware of this?
I've been in the big one, but
okay. Well, the small one is adjacent to it, and that's where the visiting players tend to go because most of them don't want to walk next to a bunch of Lions fans. So it gives them that opportunity to be separated from that. And, it does allow the teams to be separated from each other a little bit more versus walking quite the same distance with each other. So that was something that surprised me. I did not know about that secondary tunnel. And then the tour ends with a visit to the team shop at the end. And so it was kind of cool. Again, just a little different look. Kind of crazy walking around Ford Field. And it's it's not empty because there's people working there and stuff and renovations going on, even if it's on the small scale. But, you're looking down that area on the main walkway on at the top of the 100 level. And there's behind the Lions, sideline, and there's nobody there. And you'd never see that otherwise. So any other things you want to share about Ford Field? Anything that, any insights you have or from any of your experiences?
No, well, the podium room is actually pretty. You mentioned you hadn't been there. It's pretty small.
Yeah, and again, with Ford Field being located where it is, expansion is so difficult at this point because the footprint's there and everything's around it. So, but that's the nice thing about having two facilities is that they've got the other facility for a lot of the other things. And one of those things is training camp. The Lions have announced that publicly. We've known it. It was starting in July. It is going to be starting July 20th, exactly a week earlier than a year ago due to the Hall of Fame game. The Lions just announced it all publicly, so the fans can know when they're going to show up as well. I actually just read today that it looks like rookies report July 16th, veterans report July 19th, and then it all begins on the 20th. There's going to be a number of dates open to fans. The first game, of course, is July 31st. But open to fans, they're going to have the Back Together weekend, the first one. They've got 3 dates set up for Lions loyal members, which are the season ticket holders. That's July 26th, August 4th, and August 13th. Again, that 26th is the first one back. Then they have a whole bunch of other dates. They've got 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7 other dates, 2, 4, 6, 8. They have 10 total that anybody can sign up for. If you're going to try to sign up for any, though, again, I think anybody that's tried to over the last couple of years knows you got to get there quick because they go fast, they go furious, and usually within minutes it's sold out. I've been to joint practices, James. I've been to early practices, which means no pads. If you had my preference, I would say joint practices are the best. If you can't get to those, kind of wait till the padded practices because you see a lot more. I mean, it's exciting to get there early and be at one of the first camps for sure. But I really appreciated the joint practices because then again, you're seeing the Lions go against other teams and a lot of more authentic like scenarios. So, what are some of your thoughts on training camp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting that they have the days that are just for season ticket holders. I think that's another kind of cool perk and way for them to do it. And having the 3 joint practices this year will be interesting. Having them all 3 in Detroit too. So last year they were on the road for those joint practices, so nobody really from the public got to really see them too much except for what you saw on TV. So I think that's just a good opportunity for fans to go there and get a little closer look at those.
Yeah, for sure. And the joint practices are actually the last 3 things for the Lions training camp for the fans, which is August 13th against Miami, which is for Lions loyal members, the season ticket holders. But then the 14th, anybody can go to that one. And then the 21st, anyone can go to that one. And again, tickets are free, but you need tickets to get in because there's limited quantities. And, last year they added an awning, a covering to the bleachers, which gives you shade. And man, if you're there on the warm day, it's a big difference maker. I mean, my daughters, we made sure we sat in the shade area. The year before when I went, I didn't bring them with me. Coach Angers actually went down with me when we went to one of the joint practices. And he and I were just bouncing around everywhere. We were barely sitting in the stands, so that didn't affect us. But it is a nice addition there.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, we got warm just waiting, to get into the tour, waiting to go through security. It was pretty hot there.
And that's mid-June, not even late July.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, final thing then on the show today is we're going to talk some Brad Holmes insights. He was a guest on the Greenlight Podcast, which is run by Chris Long, one of his former players during their time with the Rams. And a lot of different insights. We're going to jump around on a few different things. We're going to start with defensive end, James, because everybody wants to talk defensive end. We need Zadarius Smith. We need another defensive end. The things Brad brought up was, again, he reiterated how hard it was to trade for a defensive end, in season especially. He's like, nobody wants to give up their top 2 defensive ends. And then it's hard to get a third one because unless they're fully eliminated from the playoffs, what if one of the top 2 go down? So he found even trading for the 3rd and 4th guy on the depth chart, it was tough. So he's like, when everyone wants me to trade for these guys that are like, Pro Bowlers, like forget it. Teams don't want to move them. And so, he thought that was a big learning experience. And then also he talked about the day after Thanksgiving, they grabbed 3 guys off the practice squad because they had so many more guys going on IR.
Yeah, and I think he mentioned that he thought that was the only time that's ever happened in the NFL, or the first time it's happened in the NFL where a team has grabbed 3 players off of other teams' practice squads in the same week. The defensive end thing was interesting too because he said, basically the only guys that anybody was looking to trade were their 5th or 6th defensive ends. Nobody even wanted to trade their 3rd or 4th because potentially for injuries or any of that kind of stuff, like you said.
And
there wasn't much of a choice.
No, there wasn't much option. So I joked around. I said they went Black Friday shopping. I mean, day after Thanksgiving, they're like, all right, well, what can we find on the practice squad? And, they've got their pro scouts. The guys are, keeping track of pro rosters and looking. And so they went and did that. And Brad wouldn't put it on injuries. He wouldn't say, injuries cost us. I know a lot of outside people will say that and attribute that because that, obviously heavily impacted the team. But he's like, you know what? At the end of the day, we have to play better. We have to do better. And I believe it was Amik Robertson who said, hey, I'm not going to say that the guys here weren't good enough. I'm just saying we didn't get the job done. He didn't want to be disrespectful to those who came in and did step in and play and put forth the effort. But But Brad changed it from the defensive end to the interior defensive line. And this, I think, gives a little insight to what the Lions want to do. And they talked about how, Tyleek is a lot like, he's a lot like Aleem McNeil, nose tackle coming out of college with the potential to move to a 3 technique. And Aleem got his body in shape, and now he's, a great 3 technique. They said Tyleek is actually a lot closer to that 3 technique than Aleem was body-wise. Doesn't mean he's there, football-wise or anything like that. But the Lions, they value that inside push. And here's a number, and Coach Angers referenced this in one of our late episodes at the end of the season or right after. The Lions were actually 3rd in the league last year with a pressure rate. But everyone keeps asking about the defensive end and wondering about that. And so I guess visually it's not matching up all the time because you don't see the guys getting home on the outside as much because, we lost Davenport and Hutch. And so you're like, okay, but we did get a good push up the middle oftentimes. Then the struggle came into being able to contain people. So Brad said if you're not good in the middle, it doesn't matter what you have on the edge. It doesn't matter where your safeties are, all that. What are some of your thoughts on Brad Holmes' takes here on the defensive line?
Yeah, it's kind of like golf, where driving is for dough and putting is for show, and sacks are the sexy statistic, whereas pressures are not, because a lot of people don't even know exactly what a pressure is, but that can completely change a play. You can, if you change one footstep of the quarterback, you're altering how he throws the ball, and it doesn't get the right arc he wants on it or the right trajectory, and maybe you're looking at a deflection or an interception. All those things can be massive factors in a game. So pressures can be just as big as sacks, if not even bigger, because you can get pressures more than you get sacks. It's very hard in the NFL to actually get home and get a sack, whereas it is not that hard or not as hard to get a pressure. And the more pressure you get on that quarterback, the more you're just going to get in their head.
Oh,
People think it's only the times that they get hit that quarterbacks start thinking about hearing footsteps or anything like that. But it's when guys get close. Those guys are 300, 325. In Tyleek and Aleem's case, 335 or so pounds. No quarterback wants one of those guys breathing on him.
no, and again, we want the sacks because it's loss of yardage and whatnot. But heck, I'm gonna draw a parallel to the flag football game I was coaching a couple weeks ago with my daughters. Right, the defensive lineman got in there. He did not get the sack, but he put that quarterback under pressure, and it resulted in an interception for us. And so I know
Exactly.
it's a long stretch from co-ed flag football at the 5th grade level to the NFL. But I think the same principles generally apply. And that defensive lineman came back and goes, man, I almost got that sack. I go, yeah, but you know what you did? You forced the turnover right there. So yeah, I like your golf analogy, though. I thought that was pretty good. So another insight Brad Holmes talked about was coaching changes. And this is something that I think some people may have overlooked a little bit. He said he figured that, Aaron Glenn and Ben would both be gone, but he wasn't expecting so many other coaches to get poached. And, I think we've heard from Dan Campbell, there's 14 guys that are either new or in new positions on the coaching staff. Brad also he commended Dan not just reaching or reacting and hiring a bunch of people quickly, but making sure he got quality guys he was looking for. And Brad said he always appreciates how he likes how Dan puts the players first, and that's something that makes their team good. And so some of your thoughts on those coaching things right there from Brad Holmes.
Yeah, but he puts the players first, but he also puts his coaches, I don't know, first, but he puts their best foot forward.
Yeah.
He's all about cross-training the coaches to get them to know everything, to get them prepared for moving up and having a position. He's not just preaching to the linebackers coach to just coach the linebackers. He's, like, you're maybe going to be the defensive coordinator someday somewhere, whether it's here or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened with Kelvin Shepherd. So, he's already had him do some of those things. And, so he's had a little bit more of a foot in the door as a defensive coordinator than another position coach, maybe from somewhere else, in that Campbell has really cross-trained these guys and gotten them prepared for moving up rather than just, oh, you coach your position and we'll do the rest.
Yeah, well, and you knew that Chris Long wasn't going to let him go without asking him the big question, right? He's like, well, how about that Chicago job, Brad? As far as that goes, Brad said he did not know until it actually was accepted. He knew that Ben had interviewed there, but he wasn't sure that he'd be taking that job. And he said, I'm probably hoping he wouldn't. And then his last little thing was, he's like, but there's a little bit of, why Chicago? Why Chicago, right, is what Brad said. And so Chris Long followed up on that and said, hey, changing the locks when a guy leaves, do you have to, adjust all your terminology because they're going to be facing him twice a year. It's not like he went to the Raiders or something and you play some like once every 4 years. It's twice every year. Brad says, well, that's going to come from Dan. And as far as changing things, he says they're always looking to evolve. Right, they're going to change regardless. He doesn't think there's going to be wholesale changes. We've kind of talked about that before, but they do expect some evolution. So, what are your thoughts on this? Because, we now face a coach who knows as much about us as possible.
Yeah, I think, Coach Morton talked about that a little bit in his media availability not too long ago, where he said, yeah, it's new terminology.
Yeah.
So they're changing that stuff, at least a good chunk of it. Just because they're gonna face him twice a year. They'll probably eventually face Aaron Glenn too, down the road. So, they're gonna have to change that stuff. But that stuff changes so often anyway. It doesn't stay the same. You've got to change it, or otherwise you're gonna get scouted and teams know what your calls are.
For
So,
sure.
so you have to change or at least adapt those things almost every few weeks.
Yeah. Yep. And then he talked Frank Ragnow, which we've talked a lot about recently, and no surprise, not an easy guy to replace. Brad did say, he had a sense it could be this year or next year. He wasn't really sure, but he did say the team did start to prepare for having to replace him. And, by seeing what they drafted this year, now it all lines up that much more. 'Cause I'm like, wow, they put a lot of spots, a lot of resources into the offensive line. But they also asked, well, what are you looking for in your next center? And they said intelligence, personality, communication are things they look for in a new center. And all that is a must before you even start looking at your size and other attributes and abilities. And those are speaking to a lot of things that Frank brought to the team as well, because that communication tool or ability is big because, you're the one, helping guide that offensive line.
Yeah. And if you look at at everything in the scouting reports on Tate Ratledge, that's exactly what jumps off the page about him too. So,
Yeah.
I think that they got their guy that they wanted to have around as a potential replacement. And if Frank stayed around and played a couple more years, then they got a really good guard to put next to him.
Yeah, that training camp battle. If you go into training camp, you watch that offensive line, man. That's going to be I mean, there'll be other things to watch, but that offensive line was already going to be interesting, even if Frank Ragnow had stayed with the team. But now that there's 2 open spots on there and even a potential for more shuffling, again, in those middle 3 spots, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. The final topic here was a receiver, and this is one that caught a lot of people off guard, and that was the drafting of Isaac Taslaw. Brad shed some light on this, which was good. He said he heard about him from some Lions scouts. They're the ones that spotted him, and that was before the Senior Bowl. But then they saw him live in action at the Senior Bowl, and Brad was like really impressed by his strength in the run game because, again, Taslaw did not have tons of stats at Arkansas. And he played at Hillsdale before that. But he said that run game, he goes, he has not seen a guy like that since they drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I mean, that's a great thing to be compared to if you're Isaac Taslaw. And then on top of that, the blocking ability, he said, Taslaw was just catching every single ball with his hands and not touching his body. And, you got to be able to catch the ball, right? Doesn't matter how good the throw is by the quarterback. Doesn't matter how fast you can run. If you can't catch the ball, everything else was was pointless. So, and there's been a number of guys who have shuffled through the Lions at times that couldn't catch the ball in the past, that you love seeing the focus on this. And that's where the Lions fell in love with him. And that was even before his standout combine, James.
Yeah, I heard that, the Senior Bowl and the Combine is when the Lions were like, oh, now everybody knows about this guy and we're going to have to move up to get him.
There you go.
And that's one of the stories that I saw after the draft was that someone got a story. I don't know if it was directly from Brad Holmes or just secondhand or whatever about that the Lions really were kind of disappointed when he got an invite.
Yeah, I bet.
Because then other teams saw him and their guy that they were going to hopefully get later in the draft was somebody that they had to move up to get. It's interesting, how Amon-Ra St. Brown keeps that list of all the wide receivers who are drafted ahead of him in his draft.
Yeah.
He's got two guys in his wide receiver room who were drafted in higher spots by the same team than where they got him.
That he does, yeah. No. Well, Brad Holmes, this is a great time of year to be making the rounds, right? He did the Chris Long podcast. He also was on Field Yates' show. And that one isn't so much about the Lions itself or the current day team as much. It's more about Brad Holmes' journey. And it's really interesting if you don't know his story and stuff. And I think on there he said the Lions actually offered him an internship like 30 years ago. And he said he ended up taking one with the Rams. I think it was 30 years, maybe it was 20. But he took one with the Rams because when he did a little bit of recon work and he was looking through the team, the team handbook or the team, the book that's got the program, it's got all the players, coaches, or the players and coaches. He said a lot of Rams coaches had previously been interns. And at that time, he didn't see any Detroit Lions coaches or personnel of any sort that had previously been interns. And so that's what kind of gravitated him towards the Rams. But of course, we know he had an uncle who was a first-round draft pick by the Lions. So it's kind of come full circle in a way that way. And he says he never could have imagined being the GM for the Lions in his wildest dreams. And I won't ruin any more of that podcast. If you want to listen to it, it's a great story about Brad Holmes. James, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think we're good, man. Right?
Yeah, I
off
do
season,
as well.
So optimism abounds.
There we go. Folks, enjoy the summer. Hopefully it's nice weather. It warms up these next few weeks. Lions play next month, which training camps opens next month. So hopefully we're off the next couple of weeks here, and we'll get back to you guys in early July with maybe some more new information. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can tell your friends and family about the show if you would. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major streaming platforms. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Check out more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.